Poor Triplets sit alone in ER. Millionaire stops when he sees they wear necklaces. From his past, the fluorescent lights of St. Mary's emergency room cast harsh shadows across the worn linoleum floor as Marcus Wellington adjusted his expensive Italian suit jacket. At 58, the real estate mogul cut an imposing figure even in the sterile hospital environment. His silver hair was perfectly styled despite the late hour, and his Rolex caught the light as he checked the time. 11:47 p.m. He wasn't here by choice. His driver had rear-ended a pickup truck on Highway 95, and hospital protocol required him to be examined for potential injuries, though he felt fine. Marcus had built his empire on precision and control, and this delay was just another obstacle to overcome. Mr. Wellington? A tired-looking nurse approached with a clipboard. The doctor will see you shortly. If you'd like to wait in the private wing, the regular waiting area is fine, Marcus replied curtly, his Boston accent still noticeable despite decades in Atlanta. He preferred to observe people when he had time to kill. It had served him well in business negotiations. As he settled into an uncomfortable plastic chair, his attention was drawn to 3 children huddled together in the corner. They couldn't have been more than 8 years old, and the family resemblance was unmistakable. Identical triplets with sandy blonde hair and bright blue eyes. Their clothes were clean, but clearly second-hand. Mismatched sneakers, jeans with patches at the knees and worn hoodies that had seen better days. What struck Marcus wasn't their obvious poverty, but their composure. While other children in the ER cried or fidgeted, these 3 sat quietly, the oldest looking boy in the middle with his arms protectively around his brothers. They whispered to each other in hushed tones, occasionally glancing toward the treatment rooms. "Mama's gonna be okay," the middle boy was saying softly. "The doctors are helping her, but what if she's not, Tommy?" one of his brothers replied, his voice barely audible. "What if we have to go back to—" "Shh, Danny, don't think about that," the third boy interrupted. "Tommy's right. Mama's strong." Marcus found himself leaning forward, drawn by their quiet courage. It reminded him of something from his own childhood, though he couldn't quite place what. As he watched, Tommy pulled something from beneath his hoodie, a small silver necklace with what appeared to be a locket. The other 2 boys did the same, and Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. The lockets were distinctive, heart-shaped, with an intricate Celtic knot design around the edges. Even from across the room, Marcus could see they were old, the silver tarnished with age. His hand instinctively moved to his chest, where beneath his silk shirt lay an identical necklace he hadn't removed in 35 years. "No," he whispered to himself, his composed facade cracking for the first time in years. "It can't be." He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. The movement caught Tommy's attention, and their eyes met across the waiting room. The boy's gaze was steady and mature beyond his years, but there was something else there, something familiar that made Marcus's chest tighten. Taking a deep breath, Marcus walked slowly toward the children. They watched him approach with the wariness of kids who had learned not to trust easily, but didn't move away. "Excuse me," Marcus said gently, crouching down to their eye level. "I couldn't help but notice your necklaces. They're very unusual. Where did you get them?" Tommy's hand moved protectively over his locket. "Our mama gave them to us. They belong to our daddy." "Your father?" Marcus's voice was carefully controlled. Is he here with you?" The 3 boys exchanged glances, and Danny, who seemed to be the most talkative, shook his head. "Daddy died before we were born. Mama said he was in the army and got hurt real bad. She said these were the only things he left us, sides our names." Marcus felt the world tilt slightly. "Your names?" "I'm Thomas James Morrison," Tommy said formally, as if reciting something he'd been taught. "This is Daniel Patrick Morrison, and that's Michael Sean Morrison. Mama says Daddy picked our names himself before he died." The names hit Marcus like physical blows. Thomas, Daniel, Michael, the names he and his brothers had chosen for their future children during late-night conversations in their shared bedroom 40 years ago. Morrison had been Sarah's maiden name. "And your mother?" Marcus managed to ask, his voice hoarse. "What's her name?" "Sarah Morrison," Michael piped up for the first time. "But she's really sick. The doctors took her back there a long time ago." He pointed toward the treatment area with a small, trembling finger. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, fighting to maintain his composure. Sarah Morrison. The girl he'd loved with the desperate intensity of youth. The girl he'd planned to marry, before pride and a family argument had torn them apart. The girl who had tried to call him 3 months after he'd left for college, whose calls he'd ignored because he was too angry, too hurt to listen. "Boys," he said carefully, "can you tell me about your daddy? What did your mama tell you about him?" Tommy looked uncertain, but something in Marcus's gentle tone seemed to reassure him. "Mama said Daddy was really smart and wanted to help people. She said he was going to be a teacher, but then there was a big fight with his family, and he joined the army instead. She said he was brave and kind, and that he would have loved us so much." Each word was like a piece of a puzzle falling into place. Marcus remembered that fight with his father, the old man's demands that he study business instead of education, the ultimatum that had driven him to enlist in spite and anger. He remembered Sarah begging him not to go, remembered walking away from her tears because his pride was more important than his heart. "The army," Marcus repeated slowly. "Do you know where he served?" "Afghanistan," Danny said quietly. "Mama has a flag they gave her when he died. She keeps it folded real neat in our apartment." Marcus's hand moved unconsciously to his necklace. He'd gotten it from his grandmother, along with 3 others, one for each of the grandchildren she'd known. She'd never see grow up. She'd made him promise to give them to his brothers when they were old enough, and to keep one for his own future family. But there had been no other family. After Sarah, he'd thrown himself into business, building walls around his heart along with his fortune. His brothers had died in a car accident 5 years after he'd left for the army, taking with them any chance of reconciliation. He'd kept all 4 necklaces, unable to part with the last connection to the family he'd lost through his own stubborn pride. All except one. He'd given one to Sarah the night before he'd left for basic training, a promise that he'd come back to her. A promise he'd broken when injured pride kept him from returning her calls, from swallowing his ego long enough to hear what she'd been trying to tell him. "Boys," Marcus said softly, his voice thick with emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel. "In decades, I think I knew your daddy." Tommy's eyes widened. "You did? Really?" Marcus nodded, pulling his own necklace from beneath his shirt. The boys gasped in unison as they saw the identical locket. "I think," Marcus said, his voice barely steady, "your daddy was my brother." The waiting room seemed to fade away as the magnitude of the moment settled over them. These weren't just 3 poor children alone in a hospital. They were his nephews. The family he'd thought lost forever had been here all along, growing up without knowing they had an uncle who could have helped them, who should have been there for them. "But that means," Tommy began, his young mind working through the implications. "That means you're our uncle," Danny finished in amazement. Before Marcus could respond, a doctor in scrubs approached their small group. Her expression was serious but not grave, and Marcus found himself holding his breath. "Are you the family of Sarah Morrison?" she asked. "We're her boys," Tommy said quickly, standing up. "Is Mama okay?" The doctor smiled gently. "Your mother's going to be fine. She had a severe case of pneumonia that developed into a respiratory infection. But we've got her on antibiotics, and she's responding well. She was asking for you." The relief on the boys' faces was palpable, and Marcus felt his own tension ease, slightly. But as the doctor continued, his concerns shifted to new territory. However, the doctor said carefully, "She's going to need to stay here for at least a week, maybe longer. Is there a family who can take care of you boys?" The triplets exchanged worried glances, and Tommy's protective stance became more pronounced. "We'll be okay," he said quickly. "We can take care of ourselves." The doctor looked skeptical. "How old are you boys?" 8, Michael said quietly. "But we're really responsible. Mama taught us how to cook and clean and everything." Marcus watched this exchange with growing understanding. These children had been taking care of themselves and their sick mother for who knows how long. They'd learned independence out of necessity, developed maturity beyond their years because they'd had no choice. "Doctor," Marcus said, standing up and extending his hand. "I'm Marcus Wellington, I'm their uncle." The doctor looked surprised but relieved. "Oh, wonderful. Mrs. Morrison didn't mention any family." "We've been out of touch," Marcus said carefully. "But I'm here now, and I'll make sure the boys are taken care of." Tommy looked up at him with a mixture of hope and wariness. "You really are our uncle. You're not just saying that because you feel sorry for us." Marcus knelt down again, meeting each boy's eyes in turn. "I'm really your uncle, Tommy, and I'm not going anywhere." As the doctor led them back to see their mother, Marcus found himself walking beside 3 children who had changed his life in the span of 20 minutes. He thought about the luxury apartment that awaited him across town, with its empty rooms and pristine silence. He thought about the business empire he'd built to fill the void where family should have been. But mostly, he thought about second chances, and how sometimes the most important ones came disguised as 3 8-year-old boys in a hospital waiting room, wearing necklaces that connected them to a past he'd thought was lost forever. The heavy double doors to the treatment area swung, closed behind them, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of something Marcus hadn't dared hope for in 35 years. The chance to be part of a family again. The pediatric ward of St. Mary's Hospital was quieter than the emergency room, but the soft beeping of monitors and hushed conversations of medical staff created a constant background hum. Marcus followed the 3 boys down the corridor, his expensive shoes silent on the polished floor. His mind raced as he processed everything that had happened in the last hour. Sarah looked smaller than he remembered, fragile against the white hospital sheets. Her blonde hair, now streaked with impremature grey, was pulled back from a face that still held traces of the beauty that had captivated him as a young man. Even unconscious and breathing with the help of an oxygen mask, she maintained the quiet strength that had first drawn him to her. The boys clustered around her bed with practiced ease, Tommy taking the chair closest to her head, while Danny and Michael positioned themselves on either side. They'd clearly done this before, spent long hours in hospitals, watching over their mother with the dedication of seasoned caregivers. "The nurse said she's sleeping because of the medicine," Tommy explained to Marcus in a whisper. "But she can hear us if we talk to her." Marcus watched as each boy took turns, holding their mother's hand, whispering soft reassurances and updates about their day. Their love was palpable, their concern mature beyond their years. He found himself wondering how many nights they'd spent like this, how many times they'd worried about losing the only parent they'd ever known. "Mama," Danny said softly, "there's someone here we want you to meet." "He says he knew Daddy." Sarah stirred slightly at the mention of her late husband, her eyelids fluttering. Marcus stepped closer to the bed, his heart pounding as her eyes slowly opened. For a moment she looked confused, disoriented by the medication and unfamiliar surroundings. Then her gaze focused on him, and he watched a series of emotions cross her face: recognition, shock, disbelief, and something that might have been old pain. "Marcus." Her voice was barely a whisper through the oxygen mask. He nodded, unable to trust his voice. The doctor adjusted Sarah's mask, allowing her to speak more clearly. I can't believe. She struggled to sit up, and Marcus instinctively moved to help her, adjusting her pillows. After all these years, why are you here? I was in the ER after a car accident, Marcus explained, his voice gentle. I saw the boys, and their necklaces. He touched his own locket through his shirt. Sarah, why didn't you tell me? When you called all those years ago, why didn't you leave a message? Sarah's eyes filled with tears, and she glanced at her sons, who were watching the exchange with intense curiosity. Boys, could you go get some juice from the vending machine? I need to talk to Uncle Marcus for a few minutes. Tommy looked hesitant to leave his mother, but something in her tone convinced him it was important. Come on, he told his brothers. Oh, we'll be right back, Mama. As soon as they were alone, Sarah's composure cracked. I tried to tell you, Marcus. I called and called, but you never answered. Your father, he finally took one of my calls and told me never to contact you again. He said you were building a new life and didn't need complications from your past. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. My father said what? He said you'd made it clear you wanted nothing to do with me or with any responsibilities that might hold you back from your education. Sarah's voice was thick with old hurt. When I told him I was pregnant, he offered me money to handle the situation quietly. When I refused, he said if I ever contacted you again, he'd make sure I regretted it. The full weight of his father's manipulation hit Marcus like a physical blow. The old man had intercepted Sarah's calls and had lied to both of them to keep them apart. Marcus thought of all the years he'd spent angry at Sarah for not trying harder to reach him, all the years she'd spent raising his children alone, believing he'd abandoned them. Sarah, I never knew. I swear to you, I never knew about the boys. His voice broke slightly. If I had known, would it have mattered? The question was quiet, but loaded with years of wondering. You were so angry when you left, so determined to prove your independence. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the young man he'd been. Proud, stubborn, desperate to prove himself. I was an idiot, he said finally. I was hurt and angry, and I let my pride destroy the best thing in my life. I've regretted it every day for 35 years. They're good boys, Marcus. They're smart, kind, and strong. They've had to be. Sarah's voice was filled with maternal pride, tinged with sadness. I've tried to give them everything they need, but it's been hard. Marcus finished gently. How hard, Sarah? She was quiet for a moment, clearly debating how much to reveal. Finally, she sighed. I work 2 jobs. Cleaning offices at night and stocking shelves at a grocery store during the day. We live in a 1-bedroom apartment in Riverside. The boys share the bedroom and I sleep on the couch. We get by, but just barely. When I got sick this time, Marcus picked up on the implication immediately. I've been getting sick more often lately. Respiratory infections, flu that won't go away. The doctor says it's from exhaustion and stress, but I can't afford to take time off work. Sarah looked toward the door where her sons had disappeared. I worry about what will happen to them if something happens to me. They don't have anyone else. The weight of responsibility Marcus felt was overwhelming, but it was also strangely liberating. For the first time in decades, he had a purpose beyond making money and acquiring property. He had family who needed him. They have me now, he said firmly. Sarah, I want to help. I want to be part of their lives. Sarah studied his face carefully. Marcus, you're a millionaire. You live in a different world than we do. You can't just drop into their lives and expect everything to change overnight. Why not? The question came out more forcefully than he'd intended. Sarah, I've spent 35 years building a fortune, and for what? I live alone in a penthouse apartment. I work 70 hours a week, and I have no one to share any of it with. Those boys out there are my brother's children. They're my family. Your brother? Sarah looked confused. Marcus realized he'd never explained the full connection. The necklaces. My grandmother gave them to me to share with my brothers. I gave you mine, but I always believed the others would go to David and James when they got married. They died 5 years after I left for the army. A car accident. Understanding dawned in Sarah's eyes. So when you told them their father was your brother, I meant it metaphorically at first, but then I realized we promised each other we'd be brothers for life. We picked out those names for our future children together. In every way that matters, David Wellington was their father. I owe it to his memory to take care of his sons. The boys returned then, carrying juice boxes and wearing identical expressions of barely contained curiosity. Tommy immediately went to his mother's side. Are you feeling better, Mama? Much better, sweetheart. Sarah reached out to touch each of her sons' faces. Uncle Marcus and I have been talking about some changes that might be coming. What kind of changes? Danny asked, though he looked more excited than worried. Marcus looked at Sarah, seeking permission. She nodded slightly. Well, Marcus began. First thing, your mama is going to stay here until she's completely better. No rushing back to work before she's ready. But Mama, what about the jobs and the rent? Michael's practical concerns showed how much these children had been forced to think like adults. That's where I come in, Marcus said gently. I'm going to make sure all of that is taken care of. And I was thinking, while your mama gets better, maybe you boys would like to come stay with me. The triplets exchanged glances, having one of their silent conversations that twins and triplets seemed to master instinctively. Where do you live? Tommy asked, ever the protective older brother. I have a big apartment downtown with lots of room. There's a pool on the roof and a game room, and each of you could have your own bedroom if you wanted. Our own bedrooms? Danny's eyes went wide. We've never had our own bedrooms. What about school? Michael asked practically. There's an excellent school just a few blocks away. I can get you enrolled there. Marcus paused, then added, but only if you want to. This is all up to you boys and your mama. Sarah watched the exchange with tears in her eyes. Boys, what do you think? Another silent consultation among the triplets. Then Tommy spoke for all of them. Can we visit Mama every day? Every single day, Marcus promised. And when she gets better, can she come live with us too? Danny added. Marcus looked at Sarah, seeing the hope and fear warring in her expression. If that's what everyone wants, then yes. Then yes, Tommy said solemnly. We'd like that very much. The next few hours passed in a blur of arrangements. Marcus called his lawyer, his accountant, and his assistant, setting wheels in motion that would change all their lives. Sarah's rent was paid for the next year, her jobs were contacted with explanations for her absence, and the hospital was informed that all medical expenses would be covered. Dr. Patterson, the attending physician, was clearly impressed by the sudden improvement in Sarah's situation. It's amazing what peace of mind can do for recovery, she told Marcus as they spoke in the hallway. Sarah's vitals have already improved, significantly since you arrived. As the night wore on, the boys fell asleep in various chairs around their mother's bed. Marcus found himself standing at the window, looking out at the city lights and reflecting on how completely his life had changed in a single evening. Thank you, Sarah said softly from behind him. He turned to find her watching him with tears in her eyes. I never hoped. I should be thanking you, Marcus replied. You raised 3 incredible children on your own. You kept David's memory alive for them, gave them values and strength and love. I'm the one who should be grateful that you're giving me the chance to be part of their lives now. They're going to change your life completely, you know, Sarah warned with a small smile. No more quiet evenings or spontaneous business trips. There will be homework and soccer practice and parent-teacher conferences. There will be arguments and mess and noise. Marcus looked at the 3 sleeping boys, at their peaceful faces and the way they instinctively stayed close to each other, even in sleep. Good, he said quietly. It's been too quiet for too long. As dawn broke over Atlanta, Marcus Wellington, prepared to leave the hospital with 3 nephews he'd only just met, to begin a life he'd never planned, but had apparently been waiting for his entire adult life. The necklaces that had brought them together would no longer be the only connection to his past. They would become the foundation for a future he was finally ready to embrace. Sarah squeezed his hand as he prepared to leave. "Take care of them." "Marcus, I will," he promised. "And I'll take care of you too. We're family now, all of us." As he gently woke the boys and prepared to take them to their new temporary home, Marcus realized that sometimes the most important business deals aren't made in boardrooms or lawyers' offices. Sometimes they're made in hospital rooms at dawn, sealed not with signatures, but with trust, hope, and the simple promise to show up for the people who need you most. The elevator doors closed on St. Mary's Hospital, carrying Marcus Wellington and his 3 newly discovered nephews toward a future that none of them could have imagined 12 hours earlier. But as Tommy reached up to take his uncle's hand, and Danny and Michael flanked them on either side, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Family, Marcus realized, wasn't something you were born into or lost through tragedy. Sometimes, if you were very lucky, it was something you found when you least expected it, wearing familiar necklaces in a hospital waiting room, just waiting for you to finally come home. Thank you for watching this story unfold with us here on M&A The Story Unfolds. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. We'd love to know where you're watching. Leave a comment below and tell us what part of the world you're joining us from. Your support means everything. See you in the next story.